Well, welcome everyone to Philippines, A Life at Sea. Our presenter this evening is Callie Herring. Callie is an educator with experience across the Americas. She is excited about the power of global connections, and we are excited to have her presenting this evening. So, Callie, over to you.
Thank you, Kim. Welcome, everyone. I'm really glad that you joined us again, that you're here for round two in this conference that we are bringing to life this week. Your participation is really inspiring and encouraging for all of us as a team at MathKind. And as we get started, just a quick reminder of our norms again. You saw these just a few hours ago, but I am putting them on the screen again so we can think about what we are all agreeing to as we come into this time of global and cross-language collaboration. So as Kim said, and as you might have seen in the Participate course, today we are traveling to the Sulu Sea to learn about a life at sea. But before we dive in, I have a question for you. How long, or about how long, do you think you can hold your breath for underwater? Type your answer in the chat. About how long do you think you can hold your breath underwater? Add your answer to the chat. I see maybe 1 or 2 minutes, 15 seconds, 1 minute or less, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 1 minute. So we have some different times here. So thinking about your time, do you think this is a long time or a short time? I'm going to call on a few of you from the chat, and I would love for you to come off mute and tell the group if you think you can hold your breath for a long time or a short time and why. So let's see. I see here that Myra says maybe 15 seconds. Myra, do you think this is a long time or a short time and why?
Pienso que 15 segundos.
I think that 15 seconds is a lot for me because I don't know how to swim. So I don't have the experience.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. So for you, it's a long time because it's not you don't know how to swim. So based on your experience, it would be a long time. What about, let's see, Carla. Carla says 1 minute or less. Carla, do you think you can hold your breath for a long time or a short time and why?
Siento que es mucho tiempo, 1 minuto para mí.
I feel like a minute is a long time. I have done it, and it's been quite difficult.
Okay, so Carla, it's a long time for you. You said you've done it before and that it was really challenging. Wow. I'm very impressed. I think I can hold my breath for maybe 12 seconds. And my siblings make fun of me because I say, no, that's as long as I can hold it, no longer. And they think that it's a really short time, but for me, it feels long. It feels like that's all my lungs can handle. What if I told you that there is a group of people who can regularly hold their breath for over 5 minutes underwater? And National Geographic has reported that some of them can hold their breath for up to 13 minutes underwater. What would you assume might be true about these people? You can type your thoughts in the chat. What would you assume is true about a group of people who can hold their breath for 5 minutes on a regular basis underwater and up to 13? What might be true about them? Okay, Kim says they have really big lungs. What do you think might be true about these people? If you prefer to come off mute, you can raise your hand too. That's fine. Okay, Pao says they have something different about their body. Pata says maybe they know how to slow their metabolism. Jorge says with daily practice, it's possible. Carla also says practice. Okay, so we can think about both people who shared talked about their experience. So that must have something to do with their experience. Well, we're going to learn about these people today. They're called the Bajau people. They're an indigenous group from Southeast Asia. So as we get ready to get into that, you can see that today our workshop is going to have 3 parts. In this first part, we will be engaging in a global math story about the Bajau people. And then you'll have some time to plan a task for your classroom about this global math story. And then hopefully we'll have time to reflect together and get some feedback from each other as well about your different ideas. So let's begin. Today we're traveling to the Sulu Sea. You can see that circled here in this little red spot when I look at this map of the world. What do you know about this part of the world? You can raise your hand if you want to share or share your ideas in the chat. What do you know about this part of the world where the Sulu Sea is located? Okay, I see some people in the chat saying, I don't know anything. Nothing yet. Does anyone know anything about this part of the world? What continents are near? Jorge says it's in Oceania. It's near Oceania, but actually gets considered part of Asia. Okay, also I see some more Asia. Pato also says it looks like they have warm weather. The Philippines are in that part of the world. Okay. Warm weather. What makes you think that they have warm weather there? You can come off mute if you would like. What would make them have warm weather? I noticed that if I follow this equatorial line that Pao was talking about in her Pi session, it's going to pass right by here, Ecuador, which is where I live. And on the coast, as long as I'm at a low elevation, it's pretty hot here. So I could assume that if I travel all the way to this side of the world, if the elevation is low and it's in the sea, I'm going to guess so, then it's probably pretty hot there too. Let's zoom in a little bit. So you can see here's the Philippines. That was named in the chat. Here we have Malaysia, we have Brunei, and we have Indonesia. And this whole area right here is where we're going to be looking at today, but specifically we're going to zoom into this section right here between the Philippines and Malaysia that touches a little bit of Indonesia as well. This is the Sulu Sea, this little bitty area here. Without counting, if you had to estimate how many islands you think are in this zone of the world, how many islands do you think are here? Type your answer in the chat. How many islands do you think are here? All right, so far I see some pretty different answers. We've got 25, we've got 500, we've got approximately 100. So as you're thinking about your estimate, think, why is this reasonable? What would be a too low estimate? What would be a too high estimate? What makes my estimate just right? We're going to come back to this region in just a minute, but before we do, we're going to zoom right into a community of Bajau people that live right here in the Sulu Sea. I'm going to play a quick video that's really a time lapse of a Bajau community in the Sulu Sea. It's only 14 seconds long, so I'll play it through a couple of times. And as I do, pay attention to what you notice. What can you notice? Try to use your observation skills and add your ideas to the chat. What do you notice? I'm going to play it again. As I keep looping through it, go ahead and start dropping your ideas in the chat for what you notice about this community. What do you notice? I see your answers coming in. I see lots of kids. Again, there's a lot of kids in boats, wooden houses above the water. It's civilized by native. I see kids rowing. Everyone's moving in a different direction. Their mode of transport is aquatic, different amounts of kids in each mode of transportation. Kids in boats, everything is on the water, okay? All right, you can keep those notices coming. I noticed some kids swimming too. I see some heads swimming around in the water. So I'm gonna keep playing it, and this time think about, what do you wonder? What do you wonder about this community? What questions do you have? What do you wonder? When you're ready, you can add your thoughts to the chat. Okay, questions are coming in now. We've got, are they working? Where are the grown-ups? Where are they going? Why live over the water instead of land? Is it a floating city? Where are the people who are in charge? Do the kids go to school? Do they have access to basic services? Those are all great questions. I'm going to play this one more time. And on this last time, try to think about a math question that you could ask and type it in the chat. What's a math question you could ask about this community or this context? What math questions could you ask about this? Mhm. All right, so we've got, how many kids can you count? What direction is the current moving the boat? How much time do they spend in the water? How much time do they spend in the sea? How many trips on the boat do they do daily? Mhm. Is there some kind of trajectory or common path that they're using? How many kilometers away are the kids' home? Okay. There are so many different questions that we could ask about this context just from this 14-second video clip. And maybe you'll hold on to some of those and think about solving one later on. You can go back in the chat, you can save the questions people asked and maybe try to investigate if there's one that really is interesting to you. And I'll tell you that this or these images that we have of the Bajau people is not how they've always lived. It's something that's a little bit more recent, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. But before we do, let's look a little bit closer again at this region of the world where they live. So the Sulu Sea, if we look at this map here again of Southeast Asia, the Sulu Sea was right here. And this whole area is known as the Coral Triangle. It is the world's most diverse marine area. So in the whole planet, there's more biodiversity, there's more plant and animal life in the ocean here than anywhere else on the planet. That feels pretty special to me. There's greater than 75% of all the coral known to humans found here in this triangle. There's more than 3,000 species of fish. And on this map, all of these green zones that you can see are areas where the Bajau live. So while we are looking just right here at a community in the Sulu Sea, the Bajau actually live in all of these different places. And not only do they have communities like the one we just looked at, but the Bajau traditionally have been nomadic people. They move about from place to place. They don't stay in one place for very long. And so these spaces are spaces where they and their families would go to throughout their journey and their time together when they wanted to move on to somewhere new. The Bajau people might be the last seafaring group of people on the planet today. So while there's a lot of people in the world that live near the water, the Bajau people are probably the last who live on the water. Not beside it, not near it, but on it. As I mentioned before, they are a community of sea nomads, and they have lived on the water for at least 1,000 years. Maybe a lot longer. Their folklore says that they have been living here for much longer, but in written records, there's evidence for at least 1,000 years. They make their living from fishing and hunting sea cucumbers and other kinds of creatures in the sea, fish and octopus, and the whole family participates. So because the Bajau are nomads and they move around a lot, the kids aren't in school and they're all a part of this fishing process. You do have 1 or 2 members of each family that are divers, and the divers can spend up to 5 hours a day underwater. Now, we know that's not all at one time. We've already talked a little bit about how much time they can be underwater at one time, but they use spearfishing and dive down to pull sea cucumbers and other kinds of ocean critters off the seafloor. And as you can see here as well, a family can capture anywhere between 2 to 18 pounds of fish, octopus, and other sea creatures each day. In this picture, you can see a boat. This boat we're going to learn about it on the next slide a little bit more, but this is typically where the Bajau family would live, is on their boat. So the homes, as we'll keep talking about, are a little bit more recent, but historically the Bajau have lived on their boats. They use their boats for everything. Studies have shown that because of the time that the Bajau spend underwater, some of them, or their spleens, are actually 50% bigger than the average human who does not spend all of this time underwater. So even when they look at nearby communities and groups, the Bajau have spleens that are 50% bigger, which helps them spend all of this time underwater. So it's an interesting adaptation that this community has made because of their lifestyle. And they don't have any official state record or much of a written history at all to call their own. So they depend on folklore and storytelling and use oral history to pass their story down from generation to generation. So the boat that you saw on that last slide is called a Lepa Lepa boat. These boats are traditionally, and I just realized my numbers here wrong. This should say 5 meters. They're usually 15 feet by 5 feet in dimensions. And in meters, it's 5 meters by about, or it's about 5 meters by about 1.5 meters. And they use their Lepa Lepa boats for permanent housing, for transportation, for fishing, and also for weddings. These boats are a really important part of this culture who everything about their life focuses on the sea. In Borneo, one of the small countries in this Coral Triangle area, they have a Lepa Regatta every year. So the picture you can see on this slide is from a Lepa Regatta where they are getting together to celebrate their culture. They have decorating contests for the Lepa Lepa boats. They have musical performances on the boats. They have races, and they even play tug of war to see which family and which boat is the strongest. What are some questions you're wondering about the Bajau based on what you have learned so far? What are you wondering about now? Have any of your questions been answered? Have you had new questions arise? You can add them to the chat. And while you're thinking about those, I wanted to show you and encourage you to spend some time looking up the Bajau people and the Lepa Lepa boats that they use to make their homes. There's a lot of really interesting resources and photographs out there. Most of the photographs are from photographers that have copyright on their work, so they're not in our presentation, but there's a lot of really interesting information. One of the sites that I really liked that helped me get a better understanding of what the Bajau life might be like day to day is this website here that has some pictures where I can see a little bit more what a Lepa Lepa boat that is used as a houseboat might look like. I invite you to just kind of observe. You can see the family with some of their chores. I see it looks like laundry hanging up all over the boat. You know, here's several of them all together. I can see a smaller canoe like we saw the kids in the community. So there's a lot of interesting information out there about the Bajau. But as I mentioned, things have been changing for the Bajau people. So the Bajau are a stateless people. They don't have any nationality to a specific country. And because of this, they faced a lot of marginalization over the course of their history. They don't have birth certificates. They don't have access to IDs. The kids don't get to go to school because of this. They don't have access to healthcare. So there's a lot of issues that communities have faced as the world continues to adapt and change. Because of this, or it's one of the reasons why some sea-dwelling families have decided to change their lifestyle and move into homes that are above the water, like you can see here and like you saw in the video. So some Bajau families have moved to more permanent dwellings off the coasts of various islands. They use local timber, and their house supports are cut from palm branches and anchored into the seafloor. The residents then weave palm leaves together to form wind and rain resistant walls. And I've seen some examples where it looks like they use scrap metal as well to bring their homes together. The Atlantic newspaper reported that many of the Bajau's have been forced to come ashore, and their floating homes of the Lepa Lepa boats have become much harder to maintain. So they used to make their houseboats from trees that were really light wood, but that tree is now endangered for reasons that don't have anything to do with them. So they've had to change to a different wood, which is heavier, And for that wood, they often need motors, which are expensive and require gas, which is also expensive. And so many of the Bajau have been slowly becoming more and more connected to the land, but some of them still build their houses on stilts so that they can maintain this important connection to the sea that they've had for their entire history. Typically, a Bajau family only, that's a sea nomad family, would only come on shore to trade or to gather supplies or for protection during a storm. So now you have a task. In just a moment, we are going to work in groups, and your group is going to imagine that you are a Bajau family and your family has a choice to make. Are you going to continue to maintain your nomadic lifestyle at sea, living on your Lepa Lepa boat that is 15 by 5 feet or about 5 by 1.5 meters? Or are you going to leave your nomadic lifestyle and build a 50 square foot stilt house to live in with your cousins? So there's some differences here. Is your family of 6 going to stay on your houseboat? Or are you going to change and no longer live on a houseboat, but now live on or in a house on stilts along with some extra family members? You and your group are going to come up with at least 3 reasons why you made your decision. You should be prepared to show your work and explain your thinking and connect your thinking to math. What do I mean by that? There are a lot of possibilities, and that's part of the challenge for your group, is to think about what's the best choice to make and how are you going to use math to defend your decision. You also have to come up with a consensus altogether and decide as a family what you're going to do. So if there's people in your group who have a different opinion from you, you might need to convince them. To support you to do this, I also have a task sheet for you. So I'm going to drop 2 links in the chat. One says English, one says Spanish. And when you open these, it will force you to make a copy. So you'll select yes, make a copy. And when you do, you should see this document. So this document has the instructions on it for you. You can read along here about your situation. And then there's some hints here. So some things to consider: your shelter and transportation needs. What are the economic implications? What would it mean for your family's culture and well-being to stick to tradition or make a change? If you would like some more hints, these are optional. Here's some ideas for ways that you might get started. So I linked in the story here. The story on, if you go here, it will take you to this page. There's one in English and one in Spanish that gives you a breakdown of daily life for the Bajau people. So if you want to read that, that might be a little bit helpful for you. And there's also some ideas for ways you can maybe play with the dimensions of a home and decide to help you make your decision. There's also some questions that your group might consider. And the second page has space for you to write down your names, make your decision, circle which one you choose, and then provide evidence of your mathematical, your reasons that are connected to math. So at the bottom, we have the question: do your arguments include clear connections to math? We do ask, or I do ask you to be ready to share your work with the group. You can work on a piece of paper and hold it up to the camera. You can make a Jamboard or a PowerPoint slide, whatever it is that you want to help you show your work. You'll be sharing that out with others. As we get ready to go into these groups, well, actually first, let me check. Was everyone able to open these documents of the task? Can you do a thumbs up if you're able to get the task document open? Did anyone have any issues with that? Okay, I see some thumbs up. Okay, What questions do you have about the task before we begin? Right. Fátima.
Y perdona, Cali, tal vez no me quedó claro. El
I
documento, como
apologize.
grupos pequeños,
We're going to go into small groups. So this document that we're putting together is going to be one per group or individual. Because when we open this document, it said make a copy of the document.
You don't have to turn in the document, so don't worry about that. It's just for use for you and your group. So you can show your work however you want to when we come back together, but you don't have to turn it in.
Ya, súper.
Okay.
Gracias.
Thank you.
In just a moment, I will open up some breakout groups for you all to be able to work together. Can everyone drop in the chat their language of preference for a breakout group? Do you prefer to work in a group in English or in Spanish? You can drop that in the chat. Okay, as I'm getting the group set up, you can take a moment to start to think about what would be your reasoning. You can read over the task and get ready to get started with your group in just a moment. Okay, I'm going to open up breakout groups for 15 minutes. If you need any support, you can let me know and I will be popping around to your different groups to check on you. When you come back, be prepared to share your decision and your reasoning behind it.
I'll go first and represent the English group then. So when we met, we talked about the square footage of the boat versus the square footage of the house. And even though the boat is actually bigger, we decided that a house would give us a lot more flexibility to designate rooms and to have certain spaces. And also we looked at the shape of the boat and we said, even though the boat is bigger, technically, you can't use all of the space because of how the boat was shaped. And so really the house may be a better option, and you can also fit more people in the house. So that was one of our reasons why we picked the house over the boat. You want all three or just one for now?
That's fine for now.
Okay.
Did any of the other groups have a similar idea or think something along those same lines? I see head shaking from one group. Did another group have a different idea that they might want to challenge Kim's group with?
Hola, pues en nuestro grupo empezamos a
In our group, we started to know a little bit of the context of the kids, remembering how they are, how they were doing for transportation. Then we thought about what would we decide if we were the families of the 6 people, and everybody gave their different points of view. Some chose the house because of space, but at the end we decided to go with the boat. The argument kind of that one was because we thought about financial reasons. A boat would be transportation. It would help you, you know, for your job. Also, it generates more income and less expenses of building a house and maintaining a house, but also the size of the house needs, then you need materials, roof, the house, also because of the depth of the water, you would need a lot of material for structures, but the financial situation or income that each people would have, depending on the income of the people living in the house, we thought maybe the boat was the best option. I don't know if anybody from the group wants to add anything or I skipped anything.
Thank you, Carla, for sharing your group's ideas. Do any of the other groups have any questions for Carla's group? What was our third group talking about? Which brave group 3 participant can come off mute and tell us a little bit about your conversation? I know Soraya was sharing, Saul was taking notes. Would one of you be willing to come off mute and tell us what your group was thinking? I know Pato had a lot of ideas in the chat. Go ahead,
Sí,
Soraya.
mi estimada. En el grupo, de la misma forma, conversábamos.
Yeah, in the group, just like it, we were talking. I wanted the house, but I think most people went with a boat because of income reasons. But on a personal level, I think a house generates more stability, and the family we could provide that kind of fortress. Since they are nomads, the house could affect the family. So I think you would lose and win different things. So we are kind of divided.
Thank you for sharing. I would love to be able to ask you all to see your drawings of your homes and how you would allocate the rooms and all of that, but I know we didn't have time today to get into building out the specifics. But that's something that I would love to do with my students, is to have them actually build out. You know, I heard several people say that you could have more rooms in the house than the boat. Well, show me, what would that look like? What would the measurements or the dimensions of the rooms be? How does that compare to the space on the boat? There's a lot of different questions that we could ask and keep exploring to go deeper and deeper into this decision and backing it up with sound mathematical reasoning. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And I want to hear from you a little bit, kind of reflecting on what you just talked about. So I'm actually going to exit out of presentation mode and edit this as you all talk to me right now. What kinds of math topics did your group talk about or have the opportunity to talk about? You can come off mute or share in the chat. What kinds of math were you thinking about over the last 20 minutes?
Area.
Area.
Cálculo.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Can you repeat that, please?
Cálculo mental.
Mental calculations.
Okay. I'm going to try my best to do this in both English and Spanish at the same time. So that would be mental math in English. Doing some mental math. What else?
We talked about life expectancies because we thought that people in the houses would have better living conditions and protection from the sun and protection from the elements. And so that may give them a longer life expectancy.
Life expectancy. Okay.
Geometry, the way in which you can build your home.
Okay.
Cálculos financieros.
Financial calculations.
Densidad poblacional o razón de
Density, population,
cuadrado.
people per square feet or square foot.
Ingresos y egresos.
Income versus expenses.
Datos suficientes o necesarios para tomar decisiones.
Mm. Could I say, could we loop that into like
Enough
statistics?
data to make decisions.
Statistics and thinking about if there's enough information?
Es lógica para poder tomar decisiones.
Right, that's logic to make decisions, and I think that has to do with math.
I'll come back and edit this before I share it with you all so that it has everything in both English and Spanish. If there's more, we can keep going. I'll fix the formatting later. Anything else? Oh, I see perimeter, so not just area. I'm going to add to this. Area, perimeter, distance. I saw that in the chat. Whoops. What else? Have we covered it? I think that's quite a lot. What about social justice themes? What kinds of topics or conversations related to social justice did you have?
Education.
Okay. Education and maybe access to education?
Because we were talking about the right
Estabilidad emocional.
access to education, because they need to go to school, so that's why they need to have the boats to transport.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Soraya, can you repeat what you said?
Estabilidad emocional.
Okay. Emotion, yeah.
Emotional ability.
No, estabilidad.
Estabilidad. Thank you.
Emotional stability. Got cut off for a moment there when she was saying that.
I think Kim's idea of life expectancy could also go here. What she was sharing about life expectancy and living conditions. How do the conditions that you live in contribute to how long you live?
Yeah. Hans brought up a couple times access to quality health care when we were talking about that discussion.
En nuestro grupo hablamos del transporte también. ¿Qué
We
pasa?
also spoke about transportation. So what happens if you have a home, but you do not have transportation? So if there is some type of public transportation, like a taxi boat, a boat with sort of like basic routes established, then that's important, because what happens, if you don't have transportation, but you have a home?
El trabajo infantil, porque no van, no sé si sería.
Also childcare, child labor.
La pertenencia a algún lugar.
Also belonging. To not be like, are you a nomad, or where do you belong? What is your place? What is your origin? Or your country of belonging? A lot of things around that.
Pienso también, por ejemplo, como viven en el agua, no en el agua, pues, pero cierta parte es más
I
agua.
think because they live in water.
Un poquito de agua para ti, un poquito de pago, y es como que de repente, ¿cómo delimitar
How do you really define that? How do you define what's yours
de mis compañeros?
and what belongs to the others, to others? So it's sort of ownership, territory.
I'm going to put it as the ownership of resources, property.
También la edad.
Also the age. The age is also going to affect it in terms of your decision making. So we would have to know the age of the family, because the younger ones are usually more open to change, and usually elderly people are not.
So age and
I see.
Openness to change. What about cultural heritage? Has anyone thought about, this is a way of life, a tradition that's been around for over 1,000 years? That's longer than my country has existed. And it's quickly disappearing. I know that's something that many of you see happening with indigenous cultures that some of you belong to and that call home your countries as well. Did anyone talk about that at all or think about that?
No.
Yeah, so we can think about all of the economic side, but what about the cultural value of what might be lost in making this change? Who gets to make that decision? Is it worth it? Is it necessary? Is it just easier? I don't know. So in our pie session, Pal called it like an appetizer, kind of an abre bocas, an appetizer to just start to think about all that we could explore. You spent 20 minutes answering one question and trying to think of some reasoning behind it. And you started to touch on so many areas, both math related and social justice related, that if you're working with your students, you could choose to go deeper into, or your students themselves might choose to go deeper into. You might have one group in your class that works on each of these math areas and thinks, okay, I'm going to use finances to defend our decision. And another group says, okay, we're going to defend our decision using area and perimeter. And another one says, we're going to use geometry. And so they are each exploring a different content strand. Or you might have students investigate and learn a little bit more about what's happening to the Bajau people and think about bringing that social justice aspect in. How does that relate to what's happening in their lives? Have they ever seen something like that before, or is it completely new? How can they relate it to something maybe from their own communities? So through this one question, there's a lot of opportunities inside of this story to continue to explore, to go deeper. That's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to come back here. And like I said, I will clean this slide up before I share the deck with you all and participate. And now you're going to have a little bit of time. We don't have that much time together actually left, but you're going to have a little bit of time to think about how you might use this with your own students. So what I'm going to do now is actually make 2 breakout groups again. One will be for elementary and one will be for secondary. So you can let me know in the chat if you prefer elementary or secondary, and I will set those up really quickly so that you can go to your breakout room and discuss how you might use this story, this question, a different math question about this story. What could it look like for your students? And as we do that, I'm also going to go ahead and share in the chat with you the links to the story. And in just a moment, I'll show you how to access this. So this first one is the story in English. And let me pull up really quickly. The story in Spanish, where you can find some more data and information. This was also linked into your worksheet. So you can start reading through the story as I get the group set up. It'll be a quick 4 minutes in the group. Actually, you know what? I'm looking at the time and I don't think we're going to have time to go into our breakout groups to do this. Let's talk about it here. What ideas do you have for elementary school or for secondary school to use this story or some of the math that you just thought about with your students? You can come off mute and share.
Bueno, si me permite, creo que yo escogí
If I may, I chose to work with elementary age children. First, I would ask them, what is the activity or the work that the parents are doing? And I would ask him that question. And then we could talk about, imagine if your parents lived and worked doing these activities, like this economic activity. And maybe one group could do like a representation of that activity. So basically one of them could represent the group that would decide on a boat and the other one on building a home on pillars. And then we could sort of reflect on different issues.
Great, thank you for sharing. What else? There's a lot of really incredible teachers in this Zoom room. What ideas do you have?
Yo trabajo en una comunidad rural.
I work in a rural community.
Pues yo los adentraría también a su cultura.
So I would also try to immerse them within their own culture. Like perhaps they don't want their language to be lost. And the different things and aspects of their culture. So I would do a history of their community and of their experiences. I would try to listen to everybody's idea, and I would include math. They work a lot in agriculture. I have children that are workers. And they also work with different animals, and they actually live like in a small village. They live on top of a hill, and that's where they live. So it's very different climate, the distances that they have to travel. So I think I would try to integrate a lot of different things like that with them. And it would be a story like the Bajau.
Thank you for sharing. Any other ideas? Anyone have a different idea for math that you might explore about the Bajau people with your students? You can use the chat too. You can come off mute.
Cali, en el chat hay una intervención de Pato Sánchez.
Cali, there's a comment in the chat.
Thank you, Jorge. I didn't see that. And now my dog says hi to everyone. I hope that you hear him barking very loudly. Okay, I see in the chat for secondary, I was thinking if students can create an Excel document, calculate the area using algebraic multiplication for any dimension. Also, we can watch a documentary and discuss how the Bajau people live and the consequences of changing the way of living. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. I know we are wrapping down to the end of our time together today. And so I want to show you all where you can continue to share your ideas and upload them and to participate to make sure that you can earn your digital badge for participating in this conference this week. So here is chapter 4 of the course. I'm going to add in here the resources. I'll link the stories. I'll link the slides in here and the task sheets as well. With the task sheets, you should be able to make a copy of them and then edit it so that if you want to change anything and make it more applicable for your students, you can do that. Right here, there's a link to a group discussion. And I made a thread here to say, share your ideas to use a Life at Sea with your students. So you can click here, reply to my comment, and you can add your ideas. So the things that you all just shared, then other people can learn from your ideas, can try them out as well, can maybe adapt them. So you can add in text here, you can add in a screenshot or a picture if you've done something on a piece of paper or anything like that. And then back in the course, in chapter 9, you'll want to come down here. And in the learning task that says active participation, you'll add the Sulu Sea to one of the places that you visited. And then to earn your digital badge, you need to attend at least 2 of the 4 workshops. So congratulations, you've already done 1. If you want to do more, you're welcome to. And here we just ask you to drop a file that shows what you would do with your students. So if you have, however you might adapt this task for your students, if you would do something different, you could put a document here, you could put a picture here, and if you want to add any notes, you'll add that there as well. Make sure you save and finish, and at the end of the conference, that will help you to earn your badge. Let's see, last but not least, I am going to ask each of you to come to this discussion thread. I will share the link with you in just a moment, but I'm going to add another that okay, so there are 4 questions here that I'm posting. I'm going to share the link in the chat with you all right now to this discussion board. If you open this up, you should be able to click reply to my comment and choose at least 2 of these 4 questions to answer right now. So this will help me know a little bit about what you're thinking about, what you've learned today, what questions you still have. I can respond to your answers right in here, but that'll be the last thing that we do together today, is just take a moment before you sign off to respond to at least 2 of these questions in this discussion thread. Thank you so much for joining. It was really interesting to hear your ideas all throughout our session, and we hope to see you tomorrow as we explore Morocco and Venezuela. I'll stick around to answer any questions if you have any, but other than that, once you respond to the exit ticket, you are free to go.